Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Just to check everyone, who came here today on public transport? Okay, who paid with a bank card? Super. That's what I'm going to tell you about today, I think. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to get out of this presentation. I'll leave some space for questions at the end to drive what you're interested in. I'm going to explain to you what we had to go through to deliver a genuine revolution in how people use public transport. So what we have achieved in London is setting the standard around the globe, and I'll tell you how that impacts later. I'm going to assume you know what Transport for London does. We run various services in London, but let's not spend too much time on that. Much as innovation and technology is the big buzzword, there's been a long history of innovation, of which I'm going to focus on the far left-hand side around how we collect fares of our customers. So I'm going to tell a story about how we started with an Oyster card and how that morphed into contactless payment. So we had a problem in London in the 80s. 82 was the low point of London, and we had congestion on our network, which was at the gate line. Okay, it wasn't on the platforms, it wasn't the trains or the signalling, it was the gate lines. Lots of small stations in London. We previously used to use paper tickets. You can see we could get 15 people a minute through a gate line, and that was our problem. So we had two options. We could either knock down half of London and build new stations, or we could invest in a different way of collecting people's fares. Okay, you can see now this is what happened when you use something like Oyster, which is a smart card. You get up to 25 people a minute through. That made a huge difference and made a very convincing business case for why we were investing in this new technology. Having invested in that technology, and those that have seen the Oyster card and have used public transport, you often get passes that can happen on an annual basis or a monthly basis or a weekly basis. And we introduced all of those. But we then looked at how we could allow people just to pay as they go. Put money on a card and pay for journeys. So a really important lesson. We in the transport sector had no idea who was making single journeys, because you have no information about those customers. They buy single paper tickets or pay single fares. So was it one person making 100 journeys or 100 people making one journey? I did not know. Again, we don't know in the transport sector. We estimated that 300,000 people in London made regular single journeys who would therefore be interested in an Oyster card with a value to sort of tap and pay as they went along. So we thought it was 300,000. The actual answer is 5.2 million. Okay? We completely got it wrong. But the reason of that is, as we started to investigate, we realised that public transport in a city like London, it is the lifeblood of the city. No longer do people go from 9 to 5, 48 weeks from home to work. People use transport for leisure, for health, for entertainment, for all those issues. And people's life patterns are changing. It is not predictable. So we have found a massive increase in the take-up of pay-as-you-go, and that has revolutionised how we've been treating transport, because instead of trying to sell people long-dated tickets, as I always joke, to say to someone, what are you doing for the next year? I'm going to try and sell you a ticket in advance of what you're doing, is insane. I end up sending a very discounted ticket to persuade people to buy it. The pay-as-you-go is a far more equitable way of charging people, and quite frankly, it's what people want. So we launched pay-as-you-go, all went very well, and then we came to another business case issue, which is how much does it cost to collect and run this Oyster card system? So we in TfL did an analysis. This is from 2007, so quite simply, 14% of the revenue we collected was spent collecting that revenue. And that was comparable to other cities. We compared it to Paris and New York. We analysed it, we broke it down, and we started doing some deep thinking about the problems and issues we faced. And what we realised when we looked back in time is the issue of selling tickets was just complete nonsense. Okay? If you think about it, we only brought tickets into the transport sector because of fraud, because you started paying cash to bus conductors. This is no commenting about bus conductors generally, but you pay cash to bus conductors, 3 fares go in the pocket, 1 goes in the bag. That's what was happening. So we invented ticketing. and we say to people, you must buy a ticket. Quite frankly, it's an inconvenience to customers to have to buy tickets in advance and look after them and guard them and help them and show them to people. So we looked at it and went, the reason is that the payment industry had no product that we could use. But along came contactless payment cards. Well, actually, they didn't come along. We almost helped them get born in some respects. Because you realised a lot of these costs on the far left-hand side were about infrequent visitors to London. People who turn up and want to use the system. Okay, those of you that know London, bit of an example, I land in an airport, I say I want to use the transport system, and the person behind the window says, you'll probably need a zone 1 to 2 travel card. And as a visitor, I say, what's a zone? What's 1 to 2? What's a travel card? I've not understood a single word you've said to me. And what I say is go read a leaflet over on the side there, learn about all the rules I have for collecting pairs, and then pay me. I mean, it's insane as a customer proposition. So we looked at it and said, right, what we need to do is make it so convenient for customers, they actually don't have to interact with us at all. And we sat there and realized, listen, if people have a contactless payment card in their pocket, why can't we just tell them and give them the proposition that says, just tap your card on the reader and we'll take the right fare. That's it. There's nothing more you need to do. You do not need to interact with us. You don't need to talk to us. Visitors from foreign countries can understand that. It's a very, very simple proposition. And that is what we grabbed hold of and said, that is what we need to do. Then we had to try and deliver it. So the little tale here is what Transport for London had to do was speak to Visa, MasterCard and Amex about how contactless payment cards worked. And they were very helpful. They said, these are the rules, you have to follow them. So retail transactions, you tap your card, or you have to put it into the chip and pin if certain limits have been reached. And we said that's never going to work in transport. And slowly they also realised that it would be in their interests to change how contactless payment cards worked in transport, because if they're going after the low-value transactions in the world, which was their business model, a third of all low-value transactions in the world are in transport. So once we'd done the analysis and explained that to the schemes, they went, oh, okay, actually I understand. Why don't we create a new rule set in order to make transport work? So I don't want to go into the details of that rule set, but a bit of an achievement for Transport for London to create that global rule set that's now being used in places like New York and Sydney and Singapore to change public transport. The point I was just making here is about the customer centricity, in that often we were challenged to say, wouldn't it be easier, Matthew, if we could get our customers just to register first? And we said, no, that's never going to work. And that was our constant battle, and it's a constant battle I always run into, in that in London, I can never have the option which says all you need to do is register in order to access this service. I'm providing a public service. I cannot force people to register with me. I have to create opportunities for people just to turn up and pay. And that's been the big challenge to make this work, of which we've achieved. I'm not going to tell you about the system other than the fact that that bit over there was built by Transport for London. I have a team of 300 software developers. We developed it in-house. We've been advocates of agile development. What we've created, we've sold around the world. I've sold one instance to an American company. So in short, I think it took us about £23 million to build that back-end system. There's a good business case for that. I've sold it once for 15 million already. So TfL is also trying to explore, having led the world in the customer proposition and the delivery of that, how to ensure we get value for that in the broader picture. So this is just about how popular it is, and I don't know whether this is relevant to your areas, but when we launched contactless, we spent no money on marketing. There was no price differential. All we were saying to customers is, instead of topping up your Oyster card and tapping it, just tap your bank card. Okay? So that's the rate of take-up. And I can tell you now, we launched in September 2014. We're now 4 years later. I'm at 53% of the addressable market has switched with no marketing. It is purely the customer proposition that has shifted all those users to use our system. Now what's interesting here as well is when you look at things like mobile phones, we had lots of people come with us with mobile phones to say mobile phones have NFC capability, that near field communication. Why don't we work with us to create solutions? And quite frankly, we said no, because you haven't got a proposition worked out. You don't know what you're doing in the transport sector. We're going to gamble that you turning yourself into a mobile wallet is a better play for us. So what has now happened is we launched this first, and then we had Apple Pay and Google Pay coming up to us and saying, we've now developed our wallet. How's it going to work on your system? To which the answer is, I don't know. How do you want to make your wallet work on my system? Because I've already got hundreds of customers using it. And if you want to compete with plastic cards, that is now your problem. So those of you who remember Apple Pay from early years, I don't know if you remember, I'll borrow this phone here. You used to have to walk up to the gate and hold your fingerprint on it. You take 4.5 seconds. If anyone's seen a station at peak time with hundreds of people going through, it's completely unacceptable. But what was great, it wasn't my problem, it was Apple's problem. That's what iOS 9 was all about, was to fix that problem. Because it wouldn't work in London and they couldn't launch a contactless wallet if we would have TfL said, don't use it on our system, because it will queue things up. So that interesting space where addressing the mobile interaction and the mobile NFC through getting on the payment rails helped us a lot. And in terms of percentages, which may be interest to you, we see 10% of contactless transactions are mobile. The other 90% is card with some of them other wearables. And that figure has stayed pretty flat. We're not seeing huge increases in mobile wallet payment. Plastic cards are still very attractive to people. And again, we're not sure of the reasons. We've got anecdotal evidence, but I think it's still at the stage where people have to carry plastic anyway. Excuse me. So it's just easier to get a piece of plastic out and tap it, particularly in your wallet, than to get a phone out. So we're still not seeing the penetration there. And the key thing for us, again, this is deep public transport, so I don't want to apologise or get excited about this. Fundamentally, our business, selling tickets is not our core business. I want to move people, I don't want to sell them bits of paper. So all this diagram is showing you, these are the number of retail transactions we used to do back in 2003 before we launched Oyster. What we've managed to do is, first of all, cut that right down by offering Oyster Pay As You Go. So people could top up £10 and then make 3 or 4 journeys. So that helped massively reduce the amount of transactions we're making. And then what happened is this is the red line, is the actual journeys. We sort of matched that for quite a while. Then, of course, we introduced contactless cards and we reduced more retail transactions. So again, we cut off further down, again, make more savings on our costs of retail. The final piece of the story, though, is what we did in London was this allowed us, first of all, to close ticket offices on the London Underground and move staff from behind a window to in front of the gate and at the machines. So those people who need topping up can do it on a machine. They don't need a window. That saved us about £70 million a year. We've also removed all cash collection from our buses because, again, we made the judgment there's enough people with contactless cards or Oyster in order to do that. That saved us another £20 million per year. When we look at this project in a whole, it cost us about £30 million to deliver it. It delivered £90 million of savings in 1 year. So as an investment project, it had a payback rate of 4 months. Now that's particularly important for us in these chastened times to pursue those massive savings to us, which allows us to invest more money in public transport. But the journey to get there had to require a level of vision and drive to achieve it. The other really cool thing about it is, of course, somebody else is paying all my distribution costs. Right, so these are all the countries that have got a colour. I don't know what the colour grades are, or you can see it down there. They're countries that issue contactless cards and that we've seen in London. It's like having a distribution channel in every house in the world. And it's great for a global city like London, which again has seen its attraction. So people can turn up from wherever they are with the card in their pocket on a global standard and just tap it on our transport system and travel through it. It's a huge impact in making both the city attractive to public transport. It helps remove some of that tension in terms of customers interacting with our gate line staff to try and understand the system. That very simple, look at the maps, tap the card on the reader, just travel. We'll charge you the cheapest fare. That was all I was going to say. I know that the also talked about information, so I'm going to just briefly touch on that in that from all our Oyster card and contactless data, we've been doing a lot of work in analysing how people move through the system, how particular customers move through the system. Initially, we use that to make sure we charge them correctly. So if I'm ever missing any information, I'm starting to put what we call synthetic taps back in to make sure I charge people accurately, which is very important to us. It stops customer interaction. And in time, we will build this to a travel demand model that helps people understand what they could do better. So as I get a better picture of your journeys, we can start making offers to try and reach policy goals. So if I want more people on public transport, I need to understand people's movement and start to get more focused on those offers. It's not there yet because it's a long game to play, and ultimately I must make sure it works well and retain the trust of the public. So I think that's all I was going to just say for the moment, and allow questions if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Good, okay.
Of course. Who's got a question for Matthew on this fantastic project?
Or anything about transport. I
Anything
can answer
about
all
transport?
sorts of questions.
Okay, what time's the last bus? No. You said where you're going next, but this has been such a phenomenal success.
Yep.
Did it surprise you how much of a success it was? At what point did you think, right, we're
Yeah, so
getting
the interesting thing is at the moment is we're trying to forecast where will it finish off? How many people are going to give up Oyster card and just use the bank card? And really, is it 80% of the market? Is it 90%? It's just continually going up all the time. I think the real success for us was when we were telling everyone about what we were doing, and then once we delivered it, and now I get every city in the world coming to me saying, how do we do this? And that again is where I'm making money back by going, well, that's interesting, you should ask that. So I've got some great software I can sell you. So that's when it really came to us that every city in the world now, so in the last 12 months, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Sydney, Brisbane, and one other have all spent the money and committed to delivering exactly the same system, and 5 of those are using our software.
Fantastic. Has anybody got any questions for Matthew? There's one here. We'll just get a microphone coming to you and then we'll come to you. Thank you.
Oh, do I need to put these on, don't I?
Yes, you will.
Gosh, hang on.
Headphone up, man.
Right.
Hello? Hello?
That's not coming through now. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Try.
You said you removed cash payments on buses and things like that. Does removing that option for payment isolate some customers?
Yeah, so a really good question. When we launched Oyster, we could have said then, okay, we're going to force everyone, you must go and get an Oyster card. But that was not our way of doing it. We found the penetration of Oyster card got down to 1.5% of customers were paying with cash. So we said to politicians, can we turn it cash off? And they said no. Right, we launched contactless. We got it down to 0.6% of people turned up with cash. And we said, can we turn it off? And they said no. We spent another 5 million allowing Oyster cards to make one more journey. So if late at night someone tried to get on a bus and they couldn't, and after that the politicians said, yes, you can turn it off. So we drove it right down to an absolute minimum level. And it's important when you look at, when I speak to other cities, they're at the levels of sort of, we're at 30% cash, can we turn it off? And I'm like, you have no chance. The politics will not allow you. But that relentless pursuit of going, here's a great proposition, take it. And when we got down to 0.6%, then we could switch.
Thank you. I think there was another question just 2 rows back. Yes, you have one. Thank you.
Do you ever think there'll be a time when you've got systems in other sides of the world where you'll be able to kind of track an individual's travel right the way across it?
No, I don't. So one of the things in transport at the moment is a proposition that says there'll be some platform that can plan all my journeys and take me from A to B and offer me Ubers and Lyfts and bikes and everything else. And it's just commercially not deliverable because it just gets too big. And in some respects, one of the things I see a lot of is a pursuit for this sort of perfect customer proposition, to which I keep coming back and saying, but what is the business case? So I can see what we'll end up in London is a very focused, this is the city. If you are in London, you will be downloading the TfL app because it will tell you where you are, what's going on, all the disturbances, all those other issues. But at the edge of that boundary, or when you get on the plane, or when you leave London, work with something else. Now we have open data that allows people to understand where our trains are, and some people build apps off the back of that, and they can give information to their customers. But but there's no commercial transaction in that. I'm not paying any money for that. It's just information put out there that some people make benefit of.
Great. One more question here and then we'll have to finish. Can we just get a microphone? Just down here. Thank you, Caroline.
You're obviously in a really good position to play hardball with the Visas, the MasterCards and the Apples of the world, but a lot of retailers that may want to take something away from this presentation wouldn't feel like they could stand their ground because they're not obviously as big as an entity as you guys. I don't know if you've just got any advice to retailers who would want to do something maybe dramatic with payments and talking to these big companies or anything along those lines?
Gosh, what a question. In some sense, I wish I did have some advice, and I don't. All I can tell you is the immense pleasure I had playing hardball with Apple. No, I mean, the story is, sat in a big room, they sat there and said, right, we need to take one of your readers back to the States and go and work out how it works, etc., to test our stuff. Can we do that? And I just said, no. There was a long pause, and they went, okay, shall we come to your offices to work it out? Yes, that's what you shall do. And it was a really interesting thing because, again, the mindset was very much they're a large player. So we did stand up to it. The changes can be made. Once they realised where they were like, okay, we need to work with you guys. We've now got a very good working relationship with them. We help them on the development of their Apple Pay product to work in transport. You can get there. But unfortunately, I'm not sure I've got any fixed answers other than being a big hairy gorilla like I am in London.
On which note, thank you very much indeed,
Great.
Matthew.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you all.